is taken when he comes out to greet a gathering of Hitler Youth. For all those young individuals, a lot of whom will still die in this struggle, the Nazi government did something crazy and desperate in the last days of the Third Reich. It sent its kids to war. One of them was 12-year-old Alfred Czech, who was called a hero and given the Iron Cross by Adolf Hitler himself. But what happened to this little soldier after the cameras stopped rolling and the government he fought for was in ruins? This is the story of his prize and the sad end of the German youth who were sent to fight in World War II. The 1939 Iron Cross. In a lot of places, some awards have become cultural emblems on their own. These prizes go to a few people who are seen as heroes. The Medal of Honor is the highest military reward for bravery in the United States, for example. The Victoria Cross is a very important award in the UK. The Iron Cross is the same thing in Germany. The Iron Cross is a military award for valor and distinction that was first given out during the War of the Sixth Coalition in 1913. The Iron Cross is still a sign of bravery and military skill today. This prestigious honor has not been given to every outstanding German history, but only to those who demonstrated extraordinary fortitude in difficult situations. The Iron Cross of 1939, which was given to soldiers of all ranks during the Nazi government, became a symbol of valor and military honor during World War II. Adolf Hitler, the head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, gave out all the medals. Senior officers in the Wehrmacht, the Waffen-SS, or other branches frequently gave out Iron Crosses in person. His direct boss would recommend a soldier. The award would be given out with Hitler's permission and with the approval of higher command. And very seldom, Hitler himself gave the honor to people who had won important battles or done something that was important in a symbolic way. A lot of the time, these people were asked to come to the Reich Chancellery in Berlin to get the award straight from him. Sometimes Hitler gave out the honor at his headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, and unlike most adults who won the medal, 12-year-old Alfred Czech was taken to Adolf Hitler's bunker in Berlin to be recognized. But how did young boys come to the front lines? What did Czech do to win the Iron Cross, which is such a high honor? The kids that are missing. It was awful to be a kid in Germany in the 1930s. Think about it. The repercussions of World War I are still being felt in the country. For many kids, life is all about basic things like playing outside, attending to school, and being a part of a club. For years, groups like the Boy Scouts have been a source of adventure and fellowship. But something bad was going on. Hitler understood a harsh truth when he took power in 1933. To guarantee the future, you must captivate the hearts and minds of the young. Hundreds of thousands of kids belonged to established youth groups, but the Nazis were already starting their own group. They kept a youth wing from 1922 on, not to teach kids how to tie knots or about nature, but to get them ready to be warriors in the paramilitary. This wasn't just another hobby. It was a line of people that were loyal. The Hitler Youth grew quickly as the Nazi Party gained more power. They marched in exciting parades while wearing dazzling outfits. By the end of 1933, there were more than 2 million of them. They worked to break up other youth groups that were less violent, leaving the Hitler Youth as the only choice for German kids. The real goal was both clever and sad at the same time. The Hitler Youth were like a Trojan horse that brought Nazi ideology right into the home. Children were bombarded with propaganda that made them think of the Fuhrer as a father figure and the Reich as their real family. That brainwashing broke down trust in the home. There are heartbreaking stories of kids who were brainwashed by Nazi ideas turning in their own parents for making bad comments. The close relationship between parent and child was broken, and in its place was blind commitment to a brutal philosophy. Then there was a war. As it went on, it became painfully evident what the objective of this grooming was. It was time for the boys who had spent the weekends marching and preparing to shoot to battle. They weren't just young warriors. They were kids who had been taught Nazi ideas from a young age and were ready to follow orders without inquiry and fight with zeal. The age of people who had to serve in the military went down as things got worse in Germany. By 1943, all boys who were 17 years old or older had to join the military. As defeat drew near in 1945, Nazi commanders became even more desperate. They started sending boys to the front lines. A lot of them were only 10 to 13 years old. They were abducted from the junior portion of the Hitler Youth, the Deutsches Jungvolk, which means German young people. You know what a 10-year-old is like. Think about giving them a uniform and a rifle that is almost as big as they are and telling them to stop the world's strongest armies from moving forward. In any real sense, these people were not soldiers. They were kids on missions that were almost sure to end in death. They wasted their lives in a last-ditch effort to purchase time. If a kid was scared, hesitated, or tried to run away, his punishment may be quick and harsh, even death at the hands of his superiors. The ordeal didn't end for those who lived. When they were caught by Allied forces, they typically faced a confusing mix of pity and anger. Kids who were both innocent victims and tools of an enemy state. Alfred Czech was one of these boys, the boy and the shattered Fuhrer. Alfred Czech was born on October 12, 1932, in Slatnik, which is now in Poland. He joined the Deutsches Jungvolk in 1942, when he was approximately 10 years old. During the war, they sent messages for the civil defense. The Jungvolk helped Germany in the war by collecting things like paper and scrap metal to be recycled. But some of these lads had to join the Hitler Youth and were put in tank close combat units with handheld weapons to fight enemy tanks. Some of these lads were spotted fighting in their Jungvolk uniforms during the Battle of Berlin, for example. In his golden mansion, thousands of them died. Czech was at the first line. When a grenade strike from the Red Army hurt a lot of German soldiers, a young Czech jumped onto his father's wagon and ran toward the sound of conflict. He kept going even though his heart was racing. He was able to get 8 injured soldiers to safety on his first heroic expedition. He went back into danger and saved 4 more people. Years later, he said that as a 12-year-old youngster, he had admired Hitler. But at that moment, he wasn't preserving those soldiers for a leader or a flag. He did it because it was the correct thing to do. He would have aided anyone, even a Russian or a Pole, if they were hurt and needed help. It was just about being human. Czech even gave a Soviet spy to the police, which was a bold thing to do that got him a watch as a prize. He had been the one to find and follow the suspected agent earlier. A minor, unusual detail made him angry. A writer from Oberhof who was taking pictures in the boy's hometown had his division badge on both arms, but it was on the wrong arm. The excited child followed the man until a police officer stepped in, arrested the culprit, and took him into custody. A German commander came to their family property a few days later. He told the parents of Czech that their kid would be going to Berlin. His mother was scared and her heart screamed no at the notion of her son being put in danger. But his dad thought it was an honor that he couldn't turn down. So he left, the boy and the broken Fuhrer. A military plane took the village boy directly to a metropolis that was in the middle of a battle. The ground in Berlin was shaking. The sound of Russian weapons firing was like thunder that never stopped, just a few miles distant. The enemy was getting closer from every direction. Even though people were scared and things were about to fall apart, some loyalists put up Nazi flags. They were trying to throw a birthday party for a man whose war was already over. Berlin was a broken, scared city. 40,000 German soldiers had defected and were hiding wherever they could. Knowing that military police and SS squads were looking for them in the streets, most of the structures were essentially empty shells that had been bombarded. During the short breaks between air attacks, the women of the city would come out of their cellars and line up quietly for the little food that was left. There was starvation even in the famous zoo. A lot of animals were starving, and some had already been devoured. The young Czech came to this devastated planet. He was brought to other boys and teens who had also done daring things for their country. They still held out hope that Germany would win the war. That win was only a few weeks away. People treated the guys like heroes. They were given a warm shower and a big supper, which was a rare treat. Then they were given neat new outfits. They were taken to the garden of the Reich Chancellery and told to line up. They were set to see Hitler, but the orders they got were peculiar. Don't stand at attention like a soldier and don't give the Nazi salute. A group of cameramen and newsreel reporters put up their gear so they could film the event. Everything was being meticulously set up for a propaganda film to demonstrate the country how brave and faithful its young people were, even when the world was falling apart around them. Then Hitler showed up, like a god. The true footage from the news tells its own story. His collar was pulled up, which was different from how he usually looked neat. His mustache had become gray. His left arm, which by then would quiver violently, was forcibly secured behind his back. He was so weak that he couldn't even pin the medals on the boys' jackets. Arthur Axelman had to lean in and do it for him. Hitler carefully moved down the line of boys until he came to Alfred. He looked down at the young boy, pinched his left cheek a little, and asked, "So, you are the youngest of all? Weren't you scared when you saved the soldiers?" Alfred, remembering the moment decades later, said he just said, "No, my Fuhrer." This scene was edited into a newsreel that played in the few Berlin theaters that were still open. One of Hitler's last messages to the German people played over pictures of Alfred and the other boys. His remarks were a very clear warning. He warned them that the country was in a war that would determine whether the German people would live or die. A dinner with a ghost. Czech's tunic felt heavy with the new Iron Cross. It was a weight much heavier than its metal, a sign of bravery that he was too young to completely appreciate. He was taken down deep into the soil with the other lads, whose faces were still soft from being young. As they went down into the underground bunker, a concrete tomb under a city that was falling apart, the air got cold and damp. There, in the humming, low-ceiling heart of the Nazi system, they were fed. Hitler personally sat with them, looking like the strong leader from the posters. His hand shook and his voice was quiet. He asked each boy about their experiences and then, of course, the question, did they want to go home or to the front? What options did a kid have? One by one, each lad, Czech included, delivered the only answer that seemed to be in that stuffy room. To the front, my Fuhrer. The words tasted like duty but felt like a punishment. Czech offered the right response, but there was a strange party going on upstairs. Hitler's mistress, Eva Braun, took a few aides to the Reich Chancellery, which was in ruins from bombs, while he went to bed. They worked hard to make everything seem regular. They drank champagne, ate what was remained of the meal, and even tried to dance. The only record they could discover, though, was a heartbreaking song called Blood Red Roses Tell You of Happiness, True Tell Junge. Hitler's own secretary couldn't stand the scene and ran back to the safety of the bunker to sleep. Czech didn't see any of this. Hitler's youngest heroes didn't get to drink champagne or dance. Instead of going home, he was taken to a crash school in how to stay alive. They gave him a Panzer quickly, a massive, heavy weapon that was almost bigger than he was, and showed him how to operate a rifle. It was official, his childhood was over. But for a little moment of kindness, or maybe propaganda, the government gave him one desire. Alfred asked for an accordion, maybe because he was thinking about home, music, or something normal. Within hours, one was put in his hands. It was a strange gift for a youngster who might die. The truth was that he didn't have a place to go back to. The Soviets were already in charge of his village, Goldeno. The only way for him to go was forward into the fire. They were sent to battle in what is now the Czech Republic. He was a little soldier who was hailed by tired, battle-hardened warriors. Many of the veterans who saw how ridiculous this decorated child was encouraged him to go home in a kind way. But where could he go? Hitler's youngest idol stayed. The war ended for Czech in mid-April 1945, not with a bang but with a lot of agony. The woodland was the only place for him and other boy soldiers to stay. The boys would wait behind the trees, their hearts racing as the sound of tanks faded. After that, the soldiers came on foot. The boys would jump up in a panic and scare everyone. Gunfire and grenades would fly through the air, and then they would run away, disappearing into the shadows. The response was quick and violent, leaving adjacent communities in ruins. But the soldiers themselves were the most heartbreaking change. They kept getting younger and younger. When these kids were trapped, they often fought to the death. American soldiers said they had taken armed 8-year-olds. They came across artillery groups that were run only by youths under 12. Soon, girls joined them and used their tiny hands to fire huge anti-aircraft guns. It was no longer a struggle between troops. It was a sad fight in which children was the last victim. A bullet went through Czech's lung, and the pain from that wounded would stay with him for the rest of his life. He lived through a prisoner of war camp. He was finally let out in 1947, when he was 14 and very thin. He had no other choice but to start the long, lonely walk back to where he hoped home would be. When he eventually got to the family farm in Golden, which is now in Poland, there was a silence that was worse than the sound of guns. He couldn't find his father. The Nazi government had pushed not only youths but also old men into the abyss as a last act of passionate defiance. Alfred's father had to join the Wulderm, a desperate militia that fought against well-trained Soviet troops. He had no chance. 3 months after the conflict ended, they found his body with a gunshot hole in his neck. Back then, The Iron Cross didn't mean anything. The accordion was quiet. Alfred Czech, the boy who risked his life to save others, had dinner with a dictator and obtained a wish. Now he was just an orphan child with the unseen wounds of a war he never asked for in a world that peace had forgotten to save. He was tormented by adornment. The Iron Cross that young Czech had worn with pride quickly became a phantom. It was no longer a medal for being brave. It was a brand that made him very easy to spot. The very actual footage of a youngster getting pinched on the cheek by a collapsing Hitler was now playing in a horrifying new reality under Soviet control. The Polish police held a warrant for his arrest. When Red Army forces broke into his family's home, the threat became very serious. Someone found a picture of that very ceremony. It was a snapshot of a past that was now reviled. They made Czech's sister tear up the picture and eat the pieces as a nasty way to humiliate her. It was a cruel attempt to erase the past. When the police eventually questioned Czech, he was let go, which was a miracle. But he was never really free. He was now part of a small group of Germans living in communist Poland, which was seen with great distrust and animosity. Poles who had been forced to leave their homes by Stalin now lived in Silesia, his home country, and Germans like Alfred were not welcome. Alfred felt stuck even though he had been discriminated against for decades. He constructed a life as a miner, got married, but his heart was somewhere else. He sent in application after application requesting to move to West Germany, but they were all turned down. He got his ticket to freedom from an unexpected and ironic place. He joined the Polish Communist Party that was oppressing him because a friend told him to. The plan worked. The gates finally opened in 1964. Alfred got a job as a building worker in West Germany, making a future that is very different from his past. He also started a family, becoming a father to 10 children and a grandfather to 20. A life of making things after a youth of breaking things. The first Iron Cross, he threw it away in 1945 because he wanted to bury the sign that haunted him. He got a fake one from a junk vendor and sometimes held it for pictures, but he maintains the picture that proves his childhood was stolen. It is nicely framed and hangs above a badger's cage in his living room. A quiet personal memorial to a past that can't be forgotten yet is too complicated to ever fully describe. The lengthy shadow of a childhood. The Hitler Youth ended after the war, but its effects lasted. For many people, the group is still one of the most frightening signs of the Nazi era. Proof that hate and militarism can be taught, made into rituals, and transmitted down to the youngest people. But for one man named Alfred Czech, that story didn't finish in 1945. It wove its way into the placid normalcy of life after the war, into family rooms, horse-drawn carriage trips, and even into the pages of a magazine article in 2006, when harsh reporter Andrei Granov confronted Alfred about a picture of himself standing next to Hitler. Alfred's answer showed a nuanced, almost personal relationship with a picture that most people would destroy. I got it made bigger to 80 centimeters x 80 centimeters, and I look at it every day. It is on the wall in the living room. Alfred added, I haven't found a good frame yet, as if he were talking about a cherished picture. When asked, no problem with a criminal's picture hanging on your wall, he gave a simple and disarming answer. Why? The photo is a part of my life. That comment is really direct, which makes me uneasy. It's not an apology or a brag. It's okay. The kind of memory that shame can't erase and time can't erase. Alfred's statements highlight how history may get stuck in people's daily lives. A huge picture on the mantle, a daily look across the living room, a private ritual that doesn't care about public moral neatness. He told Granov that he hadn't talked to any of his former friends and wanted to be left alone. Still, curiosity ran in the family. But my 10 kids and 20 grandkids do ask sometimes, he said. Alfred didn't slow down into the stereotype of an old man in an armchair after he retired. After leaving work in 1982, he found solace in the countryside. He and his wife Gertrude, married for 56 years, kept alive a pastoral routine, hitching his carriage to one of his 4 horses and taking the family out for rides. The grandchildren tucked beside them, laughter, and the creak of harnesses replacing the drum batot of a bygone youth. The image is almost bucolic, incongruous against the backdrop of his earlier life. A man who had been swept into history's fiercest currents, now steering a carriage along quiet lanes. Czech's post-war life also bore small performative touches. In West Germany, where some people recognized him from his wartime notoriety, he purchased another Iron Cross from a dealer and used it when posing for photographs. It was a theatrical echo, a relic bought to recreate the image once given to him, or perhaps to reclaim a narrative for himself. Whether this was nostalgia, defiance, denial, or something more complex, it spoke to the messy ways people live with difficult pasts. Gertrude died on the 18th of January, 2007 at the age of 74. Alfred followed on the June 13, 2011 at the age of 7,478. They lie together in a small cemetery in Klein-Gladbach, a quiet resting place far removed from parades and photographs. Alfred Czech's life resists tidy moral summation. It forces us to hold two truths at once: the public horror of institutions that weaponize children and the private stubborn reality of a man who carried those years into ordinary,